They say when giants clash, the earth trembles. But what happens when the soul of a nation is caught between missiles and prayers, and when innocent hearts bleed for causes they never chose? This is not just a war of governments. It's a war of beliefs, of identities, of histories that refuse to heal. It's a war where the battlefield isn't just sand and soil, it's the conscience of humanity. The Iran versus Israel war is not only a geopolitical conflict. It is a mirror held up to the face of mankind, revealing everything we try to deny. Our anger, our fear, our pride, and above all, our refusal to evolve. But within this destruction, there is something most people overlook, a chance for awaken. Because here's the truth that most won't tell you. Chaos is the birthplace of transformation. Look deeper. Beneath every air raid siren and retaliatory missile, beneath every political headline and news debate, there's a powerful story of human strength, pain, and will, a story not of nations, but of individuals. Fathers holding their children tight as buildings shake, mothers whispering prayers over cracked floors, soldiers torn between duty and morality. These stories don't make the headlines, but they are the truth. And truth always finds a way to rise. When we talk about wars like the one between Iran and Israel, it's easy to get lost in the headlines, the political jargon, the military strategies, and the endless debates between governments. But behind every headline, there's a human being, a child who can't sleep because of the sound of bombs, a mother desperately trying to find milk for her newborn in the middle of rubble, a father doing everything he can to keep his family alive when there's no electricity, no safety, and no certainty about tomorrow. These are the faces of war that rarely make it to the front page. Civilians are the silent victims, the ones who didn't ask for this, didn't plan for it, and yet they are the ones who carry the deepest scars, emotional, physical, and spiritual. They are the ones whose lives are shattered in an instant, whose dreams are buried under the ruins of conflict they never voted for. In the Iran versus Israel conflict, the governments have their strategies, their ideologies, and their justifications. But the people are simply trying to survive. In Israel, ordinary citizens live under the constant threat of rockets. Children know the sound of sirens better than lullabies. They've learned how to run to bomb shelters faster than they've learned how to ride a bike. In Iran, people suffer the invisible wounds of sanctions, fear, and propaganda. They live with economic struggles, limited access to the global world, and the burden of decisions made by leaders they may not even support. Yet somehow they keep going. They go to work, they raise their kids, they hold on to hope with bleeding hands and trembling hearts. That resilience is not weakness, it is unmatched courage. But the tragedy is that the world rarely sees these people. Instead, the focus stays on politics and power. When bombs drop, when buildings fall, when funerals multiply, we don't see the names, the stories, the laughter that once filled those homes. We just see numbers. But they are not numbers. They are poets, teachers, engineers, nurses, shopkeepers, students, people who had plans for the weekend, people who loved, who dreamed, who prayed. And now they are reduced to collateral damage in a war they didn't create. This is the reality most of the world chooses to ignore because it's uncomfortable to face. When you witness the impact of war on civilians, you begin to realize that no side wins. Everyone bleeds. Everyone loses. No ideology is worth the price of a child's life. No national agenda is worth the silence that follows the sound of a missile. What war teaches us, brutally and unforgivingly, is that the ones who suffer the most are the ones who were simply trying to live. And yet, in all this suffering, there is something incredibly powerful about the human spirit. In both Iran and Israel, even in the darkest nights, people find ways to sing, to share, to hold on to faith. They find ways to rebuild, to forgive, to believe in tomorrow, even when today is crumbling. That kind of strength is not found in armies. It's found in mothers who teach peace to their children, even while the bombs fall. It's found in neighbors who help each other when the world has forgotten them. It's found in the eyes of survivors who refuse to let hatred define them. So while the world debates policies and politics, it's crucial to remember that the real heroes, the real stories, are happening quietly, courageously, among those who never wanted war in the first place. They are the soul of this conflict, the ones holding the weight of choices they never made. They are the reason we must care. History is not just a sequence of dates, wars, and treaties. It's a living force that breathes through every generation. And when it's ignored or misunderstood, it doesn't disappear. It comes back stronger, more violent, more painful. The Iran versus Israel conflict is a powerful example of what happens when the past is not acknowledged, when wounds are left to fester instead of being healed. This isn't just a modern issue. It's the echo of decades of political miscalculations, religious extremism, and ideological rigidity. Each war, each missile, each act of aggression is not isolated. It's deeply rooted in unresolved history, one that continues to repeat because no one dares to fully confront it. This conflict is not new. It's been simmering since the Islamic Revolution in Iran in 1979, when Iran adopted an openly anti-Israel stance, cutting diplomatic ties and branding Israel as an illegitimate state. Since then, hostility has grown through proxy wars, mutual threats, and covert operations. Iran supports groups like Hezbollah and Hamas, entities that have engaged in violence against Israel. In response, Israel has conducted targeted strikes, assassinations, and intelligence missions to weaken Iranian influence. This tit-for-tat behavior is not random. It's a cycle, a deeply ingrained loop of vengeance built on decades of mistrust and trauma. The problem is, with every new retaliation, the historical baggage gets heavier, the hatred more intense, and the future more fragile. What's even more dangerous is how easily history can be manipulated. Both sides have their versions, their narratives, their heroes and villains. Each generation is taught a certain story, one that justifies their side and demonizes the other. And so the cycle continues. Because when people are raised to remember only the pain inflicted on them, but not the pain they may have caused, reconciliation becomes impossible. It's like planting seeds of bitterness in the soil of memory. Eventually, they grow into trees of violence. We live in an era where the speed of information should have made us wiser. We can access historical records, testimonies, and evidence in seconds, yet somehow ignorance still dominates. Why? Because acknowledging history requires humility. It means accepting that your side, your country, your leaders may have made mistakes. It means facing uncomfortable truths. And in a world driven by pride and political agendas, that's a rare thing. But unless we face the history behind conflicts like Iran and Israel, we're doomed to see the same tragedies unfold again and again. Children will continue to grow up with war as their normal. Leaders will continue to trade threats instead of ideas. Civilians will continue to pay the price for unresolved pain passed down through generations. And the worst part, the longer history is ignored, the harder it becomes to change. There's a pattern to conflict. One side acts out of fear, the other out of retaliation. This creates a feedback loop where both feel justified and both feel victimized. The Iran versus Israel conflict fits this perfectly. Each side sees itself as defending something sacred, security, faith, identity. But in the process, they're burning the bridge that could lead to peace. And that's the true tragedy of repeated history. It blinds us to the possibility of a different ending. Understanding history doesn't mean excusing violence. It means recognizing the patterns that lead to it so they can be broken. It means studying the past not to assign blame, but to build wisdom. It means creating a new legacy, one that isn't fueled by what happened before, but by what we choose to do now. Because if we don't rewrite the script, we're all just actors repeating the same destructive lines in a play that ends the same way every time. War, as horrific as it is, often carries within it the seeds of something most people overlook, a moment of profound awakening. Beneath every explosion, behind every broken city skyline, there is a deeper force at work, one that challenges the very foundation of human behavior. Crisis forces clarity. In chaos, illusions die. The Iran versus Israel war, while devastating, is also offering the world a brutal but clear opportunity to reflect, to rethink, and to rise. Not in power or dominance, but in consciousness. That's the paradox of suffering. It shakes us loose from the patterns we've been too comfortable in. It exposes what truly matters. And when nothing around you is certain, the inner world becomes the only battlefield worth conquering. This war isn't just about territory, ideology, or military superiority. It's a wake-up call to the soul of humanity. It's confronting us with the question, who are we becoming? Are we evolving as a species, or are we stuck in the same cycle of anger, pride, and fear that's destroyed civilizations for centuries? Crisis makes that question impossible to ignore. It strips away the distractions, the excuses, the justifications, and leaves only the raw truth. What do we stand for when everything falls apart? Throughout history, the darkest times have also given birth to the greatest transformations. World wars led to international cooperation. Genocides gave rise to human rights movements. Revolutions sparked new systems of thought and governance. Pain has always been a teacher, ruthless, yes, but effective. And this current conflict has the same potential. It has the power to make the world pay attention again to the cost of indifference, the danger of unchecked power, and the value of empathy that's been lost in the noise. It's not about choosing a side. It's about choosing a new standard, one where humanity matters more than borders, more than revenge, more than national pride. There are moments in life when you're forced to stop pretending, and war is one of them. It forces individuals, communities, even entire nations to look in the mirror, to ask hard questions, to feel deeply. And in that discomfort, something powerful begins to emerge, the possibility of a different path. It's not born out of comfort, but from devastation, from the realization that continuing on the same path leads to more of the same loss. That awakening is not philosophical, it's practical. It's about survival. It's about deciding that enough blood has been shed, enough lives have been wasted, enough futures stolen. And that decision is where transformation begins. This is the moment where leaders could choose vision over vengeance, where young people watching from afar could decide they want to be part of a generation that ends conflict instead of inheriting it, where ordinary citizens could recognize that peace is not weakness, it's the ultimate form of strength. Every war holds this potential, but only if we're brave enough to ask, how did we get here and how do we make sure we never return? There's something sacred about survival, about coming through something so destructive and still holding on to your values, your compassion, your hope. That's not weakness, that's strength. And if this war teaches us anything, let it be that true power lies not in how much you can destroy, but in how much you can build in the aftermath. Transformation is not a passive process. It begins in the fire, in the ruin, in the choice to see possibility where others see only ending. Peace is not a passive state that magically appears when the violence stops. It is a deliberate, courageous decision that must be made again and again in the face of hatred, fear, and pressure. It demands far more bravery than war ever could, because peace is not about striking back. It's about standing firm when every emotion in your body wants revenge. In the context of the Iran versus Israel war, this idea becomes even more powerful. Both nations are filled with people who have suffered loss, fear, and uncertainty. Choosing peace in such an environment isn't weakness, it's strength at its highest form. It means saying, I will not allow my pain to turn me into what hurt me. That takes a different kind of warrior. That takes a leader, not just in position, but in spirit. It's easy to rally people around war. It feeds into our primal instincts: protect, retaliate, survive. But peace requires higher thinking. It requires emotional discipline. It requires stepping back from the battlefield, both literal and psychological, and saying there has to be another way. And that isn't just a slogan. It's a lifestyle. It means building schools instead of stockpiling weapons. It means investing in dialogue instead of propaganda. It means meeting the enemy with the terrifying vulnerability of understanding, not the comfortable safety of hatred. That's hard, but it's possible and it's necessary. The truth is, peace cannot be achieved by governments alone. It needs the courage of everyday people. It needs the teacher who refuses to teach division, the journalist who tells stories of humanity instead of hatred, the artist who paints a future that looks different from the past, the mother who teaches her child forgiveness. These are the foot soldiers of peace. And their courage often goes unnoticed because it doesn't make headlines, but it's there. Quiet, consistent, unshakable. In the middle of the noise, they are planting seeds of healing. And one day, if nurtured, those seeds will grow into something that no bomb could ever destroy. What stops peace from taking root is not just political disagreement, it's fear. Fear that peace will make one side look weak. Fear that forgiveness means betrayal. Fear that moving on means forgetting the past. But none of that is true. Peace does not erase memory. It honors it. It says, I remember the pain and I choose not to inflict it on someone else. That is not forgetting, that is transcendent. And it's something the world desperately needs. In a war like the one between Iran and Israel, every choice for peace feels like going against the current. But that's where real strength lies, in doing what's right, not what's easy. It's standing tall when everyone else is on their knees with rage. It's choosing to rebuild when destruction seems inevitable. And that kind of strength is what changes the world. Not missiles, not military parades, but the individual acts of courage that slowly rewrite the narrative. One conversation, one refusal to hate, one dream at a time. There's a difference between silence and peace. Silence can be the absence of gunfire, but peace is the presence of justice, of understanding, of shared humanity. It doesn't come by default, it's earned. And it's protected by those who have decided they will not give in to bitterness. These are the warriors the world should be honoring, not those who lead armies, but those who lead by example. Because the fight for peace is the most important fight of all, and it requires not just courage, but conviction. It asks us to believe, even when belief feels impossible, that something better is worth fighting for. When we look at conflicts like the war between Iran and Israel, it's easy to assume that the power to change things lies only in the hands of governments, leaders, and military generals. But the truth is far more empowering and far more inconvenient. Real power lies with the people, the men and women who get up every day, go to work, raise families, speak with neighbors, post on social media, and choose what to believe, what to support, and what to pass on. It's easy to dismiss individual action as insignificant in the face of tanks and missiles, but that's only because we've been conditioned to underestimate our own influence. The narratives we choose to believe, the voices we choose to amplify, and the energy we bring into our conversations, these shape the world more than we know. In the Iran versus Israel conflict, it's not just governments firing shots. It's generations of misinformation, mistrust, and inherited hatred that fuel the violence. These mindsets are not enforced by law. They are enforced by culture, by tradition, by what's said at the dinner table, what's whispered at school, and what's repeated on the news. And that means the cycle can be broken, not just by politicians, but by ordinary people who decide to think for themselves, to question, to listen, and to understand the story from all sides. When individuals choose empathy over indoctrination, the entire structure of conflict begins to crack. The greatest revolutions in history didn't start in government offices. They started in the hearts of the people. They started with a refusal to accept the world as it is. Peace movements, civil rights victories, uprisings against oppression, all were led not by presidents or kings, but by brave, ordinary individuals who said, enough. That same power exists today in Iran, in Israel, and across the world. And it's not about waving flags or marching in the streets. It's about changing the way we speak, the way we see each other, and the way we raise the next generation. It's about realizing that violence continues not just because of what leaders do, but because of what people allow. Social media has made this even more real. One post can spark outrage. One video can change perception. One voice can reach millions. That's not a weakness. It's an opportunity. A single message of hope, a single story of humanity can challenge an entire campaign of hate. But that requires courage. It's easy to go with the flow of division. It's easy to repost what makes us feel superior or justified. It's harder to dig deeper, to ask, what's the truth behind this? Who's being left out? Who's paying the price? That kind of awareness takes effort, but it's where true power begins. The belief that we are powerless is the greatest lie we've been sold. It keeps us quiet, it keeps us compliant, it keeps wars going. But the moment people begin to realize their role in the bigger picture, everything shifts. A teacher can raise a classroom full of thinkers instead of followers. A parent can pass down wisdom instead of fear. A conversation between two strangers can break down years of prejudice. It's all connected, and it's all possible when people remember who they are. Governments make decisions, yes, but it's people who shape culture, people who shape the energy of a nation, people who decide whether peace or war becomes the norm. The Iran versus Israel conflict is tragic, yes, but it is also a mirror showing us what happens when we forget our own power and what could happen if we remembered it. When people stand up, not just against violence, but against the mindset that makes violence acceptable, that's when change becomes unstoppable. That's when history bends in a new direction. Every conflict reaches a tipping point, a moment when the cost of continuing down the same path becomes too heavy, too unbearable, too destructive to ignore. The Iran versus Israel war is approaching such a threshold, not just politically or militarily, but spiritually and emotionally for the people caught in its wake. When fear becomes the default emotion, when trust erodes to nothing, when entire generations grow up not knowing what peace feels like, something deeper begins to crack. That's when the world must realize that continuing the cycle is no longer just dangerous, it's unsustainable. Every war demands a final question. How much more can be lost before someone says, this must end now? This isn't about surrender or compromise for the sake of appearing noble. It's about recognizing that the only path forward must look different from the path we've walked so far. When you repeat the same actions, you get the same results. More missiles, more funerals, more hatred. But change begins the moment one person says, I refuse to hate just because I'm told to. It begins when someone sees the enemy not as a faceless threat, but as a fellow human being. Scared, hurt, and longing for the same safety and dignity. That mental shift, though small on the surface, is a seismic change beneath the surface. It disrupts everything, and it's where real peace begins. We've been taught to believe that the end of war must come through military victory, a treaty, a surrender. But history shows that the end of real conflict comes only through transformation, when mindsets change, when narratives evolve, when enemies become neighbors. That isn't something that can be forced through bombs or sanctions. It's born out of necessity. It happens when people on both sides become so exhausted by loss that they start to ask, what are we really fighting for? And more importantly, what are we willing to lose before we finally choose something different? In the case of Iran and Israel, both nations have reached a saturation point. The violence isn't solving anything. The rhetoric isn't healing anything. The posturing isn't protecting anyone. Each escalation only digs the grave deeper for economies, for families, for future generations. And that's the tragic irony. The war that was supposed to secure safety is now the very thing making safety impossible. When every solution is rooted in aggression, peace becomes the radical, revolutionary option. And right now, that's exactly what the world needs. A revolution of peace that begins with the courage to stop. Stopping doesn't mean ignoring injustice. It means addressing it in a way that creates change, not more destruction. It means refusing to keep scoring points in a game where everyone is losing. And make no mistake, everyone is losing. Children in shelters, parents mourning their sons, entire populations gripped by fear, by scarcity, by silence. The question is no longer who's right. The question is who will be wise enough to break the pattern. That moment is now, not next year, not after another round of attacks, not after more lives are lost. Now is the time when the bravest act is not retaliation, but restraint. When leadership is defined not by strength on the battlefield, but by the strength to lay down weapons and pick up dialogue. When the most powerful legacy isn't conquest, but compassion. That's what this war is asking for. That's what this generation must choose. Because if not now, then when? And if not us, then who?